Hoping.
No. Okay, now we're streaming live on Facebook.
Dun, dun, dun,
Okay.
dun.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
So thanks everyone for joining us tonight for this very special, very timely virtual panel discussion with the folks from the ACLU to talk about the film The Fight. If you haven't seen the film, you already and you can go to the filmstreams.org website and catch it on our home movies streaming. It's a really great film. I've watched it a couple times, cried a lot, so good, very inspiring. Anyway, my name is Angie Balstrini. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Film Streams. We are a mission-driven nonprofit dedicated to the presentation and discussion of film as an art form. So with our two cinemas temporarily closed, we have had the opportunity to explore different and creative ways to continue to fill our mission and offer community programs. So the really great thing about my job is that I get to connect local organizations to our programming and then foster dialogue about important issues in our community. And it was not difficult to see how this film ties into our local ACLU of Nebraska and activists that are doing some crucial work right now in this moment in history. So tonight we are so grateful to be partnering with the ACLU of Nebraska and Culture House. And we've got a really wonderful panel for this discussion. I'm going to do a quick introduction of everyone that we've got here, but then I'll have the panelists give us more detail about themselves and their work shortly with some first thoughts about the film. So we've got Danielle Conrad, Executive Director of the ACLU of Nebraska. Quick shout out. We've got Joaquin Fox, Activist Program Director of the Weitz Foundation. We've got Rose Godinez, Legal and Policy Counsel with the ACLU Nebraska. Scout Richters, Legal and Policy Counsel with the ACLU of Nebraska. And Marcey Yates, founder of Culture House. Awesome. All right, so for those in the audience or watching live on Facebook, please put any questions that you may have, comments, suggestions, anything, in the comments section on Facebook. Our very own Diana Martinez will be looking for those and making sure that we have a chance to answer those. So right now, I'm gonna turn it over to Danielle. We'll go with you first. You wanna go ahead and talk a little bit about your position, some initial thoughts about the film, any stories about Dale Ho?
Oh, we'll get right to the good stuff. Number one, thank you so much, Angie and Film Streams. We're all fans. We're all grateful for how you combine art and activism and provoke so many important conversations in our community through those mediums. And we're delighted to be in fellowship with you and our friends at Culture House and Academy of Equity today to talk about this really exciting film, which was produced in celebration of our centennial anniversary at the ACLU, and that profiles some of our key leaders on key issues, and I think gives a really wonderful example of the work and the people and what that means for our lives and their lives. And I think that the main kind of jump outs are just the breadth and the scope of work for how many issues we tackle. We work the waterfront. We protect all civil rights and civil liberties in the state and federal constitution. So that's a lot. That's a big task. But really focusing on reproductive rights, immigration, voting rights, and some of our mass incarceration and racial justice work, I think are highlighted great. And we can talk more about that and how it's impacting Nebraska as well. So just a fun fact for all of the viewers, Dale Ho did come to Nebraska a few years ago to speak at the Holland Lecture Series, which, what a great lecture series that was. That's a whole nother story. But to talk, I remember the title of his presentation was Voting Rights, Something We Used to Have. And he laid out with surgical precision and incredible legal acumen in the funny, sweet, kind, accessible way that Dale always talks about his work and our work. But really how for so long voting rights had kind of been a point of pride where we could come across the political spectrum and protect that precious value. And now we've seen just this onslaught, these attack after attack after attack to remove accessibility to the ballot box, to silence voices in our democracy, and to suppress the vote. And so when he was here talking at the Holland Lecture Series, we met with a lot of key stakeholders during his visit, and we actually went out to the Sarpy County Election Commissioner's office to talk about voting rights. And I got lost in Omaha, and he had to navigate a bunch of car seats and Cheerios in the car, and he has little ones too, so he was really kind, and it's definitely a memorable part of my time at the ACLU, and kind of personal to now watch him in this way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Danielle. Marcey and Jaqueen, how about you guys? Do you want to weigh in? I know that you just rewatched the film as well, but give us a little bit more information about yourselves and some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm Marcey Yates, and I am the director here at the CULXR House. We are a creative safe space for folks to grow their talents in entrepreneurship. We focus on bridging social and economic gaps. Aside that, I am an artist, myself, hip hop recording artist. Been around here on the scene, for quite a bit of time. So it's been very interesting and an honor to cross over, and be on this panel, actually, with all you individuals, especially with Jaqueen too. I'm gonna let Jaqueen go ahead, man.
Yeah, I can take it. So outside of my professional career as a program officer at a foundation, I do community advocacy and activism, specifically with racial equity, and how that shows up in a number of systems. And so it was a great honor again to partner with CULXR House to start some of this organizing effort and become a real hub for that organizing activity throughout the city. I want to give a shout out to our great partners, the ACLU, who have partnered with a lot of my activism career throughout the duration of it, and have really created an awesome platform for other activists as well. And again, with film streams as well. I did my first professional panel in 2017 on police demilitarization, and I was honored to be a part of that conversation with film streams. So I appreciate how film streams continues to show up for community and host these conversations. I think the biggest part that resonated with me in the film was, again, Dale Yo's comments about how it won't just be the ACLU and the lawyers that handle these issues and create that change. It takes the people to really partner with their lived experience and create those real partnerships through direct action. And so throughout the film, you see those examples of people hitting the streets and really having the conversation that they need to have about their lived experience. And I think we need to really empower our local communities to feel where their power lies in these community conversations, knowing that as we increase our allies in the streets, we create the opportunities for real success in the courtroom.
Cool. Awesome, thanks guys. And Rose, tell us a little bit about what you do. And I know that you've been focusing a lot on the essential workers rights right now. So, and then some thoughts about the film, if you want.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. Thanks for having us. And it's good to be with this amazing group of activists and lawyers who I'm fortunate enough to work with. As far as what I do at the ACLU, I lead a lot of the racial justice work, including immigrants' rights, which is what touches on meatpacking plants issue, which I'll delve into a little later. But the film was inspiring and also it was hurtful to watch. I think the family separation part, which touches home quite a bit because I'm a daughter of immigrants, was definitely difficult to watch and brought me back to the immigration lawyer that I used to be and still fight for. But it's awesome to be within this group, and I'm grateful for that every day, to be able to fight for the rights of not just immigrants, but everyone in every category is truly amazing. And I hope everybody gets to watch the film and is inspired just like me.
Cool. Thanks, Rose. And Scout, you tell us a little bit about the reproductive justice work that you do, and then like your familiarity with the case that was in the film.
Yeah, I just want to echo Rose. I'm so happy to be here. I lead a lot of our women's rights, reproductive rights, and juvenile justice issues at the ACLU of Nebraska. I actually went to law school in New York, so I was fortunate to have the experience of working at the National ACLU's Women's Rights Project in law school, and that was kind of my first intro into the work of the ACLU. And then specifically in the film, you know, with the young woman seeking abortion care, while it was so, you know, it's so shocking to see, but I think the most important thing to remember is that, like, this is actually something that happens all too often, maybe not in that context, but it's really part of a broad effort to tear away at these rights, and we need to be aware that this is a trend, and that's what we're fighting to stop.
Great. Yeah.
Let me just jump in super fast, because Scout So Modest, so the Women's Rights Project where she clerked at was started by RBG. So we just got that at the ACLU, of course. And you know, one thing that really caught my mind, and I know we got a lot to get through, but as everybody was talking, is, you know, we're going to kind of focus on these specific issue areas that are kind of detailed in the film, but the intersectionality that is inherent in all of our work and all of our fights, and critical and grounding to creating the kind of liberation and correct kind of society that we want to live in and be proud to live in and feel safe to live in. So I want to make sure to lift that up, because that thread is throughout.
Definitely good. That's an excellent point. So you know, this is a really interesting thing. So when Dale Ho in the film actually said, you know, that he was thinking about, maybe like he would try and find a different job where he could take some time with his family and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, and then the election happened. And if I'm not going to be a civil rights lawyer now, then like, like, what is the point? Like, this is the time. So, but in your opinion, and in the professional, like, scope of what you do and activism and the community work, is right now a particularly special time in history where there's more to fight? Or does it just feel like this to people because they haven't experienced anything like our current administration? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's not like reproductive justice or racial justice, civil rights, immigration is a new thing, right? Voting rights. So let me know what your opinions. Anybody who feels like taking that first, go ahead. Jacqueline, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it would do a disservice to the people that have come before us to mention it as something new, or something that we haven't seen before. What comes to mind for me in that question is that, excuse me, is that it's not as subtle as it used to be, and it's not as subversive as it used to be. And so therefore more people can connect to the outrageousness of how people's experiences are marginalized and criminalized. And so the language around it has become accessible because of how we have entered a space to where anyone could hold the highest level of office. And we're communicating at that language now. So things are more plainly said, more plainly seen. And so we're activated to these causes in a different way than we have been in the before. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that this isn't new, especially to Black and Brown people of marginalized communities, because we've been experiencing those disenfranchisements very personally and intimately for the duration of this country. But I think the language around it has changed. And so people are coming up against this idea that the country that they lived in is no longer moral or ethical. And they have to come to terms with that or rationalize that in a way that they didn't have to before, because things were under the radar in a really different way. So I think that is what I took from that question.
Yeah, I also think that just given the way things are right now with like the health things and COVID and stuff like that, I feel like people actually have more time to like fight, rather being distracted or having to, you know, have their other daily obligations like work all day. You know what I mean? Because I know for one thing, I understand that people would, you know, they want to be active and be a part, but then they have to like live their life. You know, they have to go back to work and things like that. But given now that a lot of people can work from home and kind of, you know, dictate their schedule and things, I think people actually have more time to do research, get more involved. You know, they have the time to do it.
I'll just add to Jaquine and Marcey's thoughts. The disparities, yes, they have always existed. And during a pandemic, I think they're just magnified 1,000%. And now people are able to clearly see those disparities and see that it's a systemic issue, not just an isolated issue. And I also just see in the meatpacking context, just young people being so active, because during a pandemic, you get to be on social media, you can tweet about it, you can Facebook about it. And I've just seen children of meatpacking plant workers like myself just step up and be that voice for their family members and be that voice for their community when really the older generation is fearing retaliation or fearing really their health.
Scout, how do you feel with the, what can you add with the reproductive justice? I mean, the Roe versus Wade and the slow, like, dismantling of it for the past, 50 years.
Yeah, I would just echo what the others have said. And I think that because all of these things are happening all at once, it's, as Danielle was talking about, it's like really becomes a lot more clear to see the intersection of all of these issues. We know that when people push abortion care out of reach, it affects women of color and low-income women more than anybody else. So I think it's just a moment where it's not subtle, it's amplified, and we're able to see all these intersections in a way that maybe has been under the radar before, as Jaquine said.
Yeah, well, and specifically in the film, actually, that Jane Doe was immigrant waiting, seeking asylum here in the States, and yeah, had to deal with that guy.
Exactly.
And I'll second, third, and fourth all of this brilliance, and would just add, feeling a lot of the same in the wake of the 2016 elections, that, feeling very viscerally, after processing kind of the initial assessment that this is when our country needs us. This is when we have to be ready to go. This is what we've been training for. And to see those worst fears realized, right out of the gate with the Muslim ban, to have such a xenophobic, hateful policy, kick off this administration, and that brought people to the streets and the airports and woke them up in a different way. Same with the Women's March, same with now the sustained action in this long overdue reckoning on race nationally and locally in the wake of George Floyd and Jim Scurlock's death. And it's, people can't look away anymore. They can't look away. It's on their social media feed. It's happening outside of their houses. It's all everybody's talking about. And so while it is arduous and exhausting and not an accident that all of this is happening at once and on steroids, like we're not just having, oh, we have a policy disagreement on immigration policy. We have a war on immigrants. Like that is the shift and the change, and to bring the full firepower and the force of federal, state, and local governments to engineer that and implement that is different than what we normally see in this space. But all of that being said, everything to me in decades of activism and political work, this does feel different. I wasn't alive for the 60s. This feels different to me, and it feels different in a lot of different ways. As our racial justice director, Jeffrey Robinson, talks about, you know, you got to get out of thesaurus to try and describe what's happening right now. But to me, it's everything is so precarious, but so possible. People that never before heard our message or engaged on these issues are listening and paying attention and engaging. People from across the political spectrum are drawing lines and say, no, this is too far. This is not who we want to be. And the conversation has shifted from trying to get little baby steps in each of these areas on reforms to a wholesale rethinking of police, of public safety, of mass incarceration, on racial justice and what that means for our community. So it's a lot and it's hard to go up against that, but I'm actually very, very hopeful in this moment that this is going to put us on a trajectory to a much, much stronger footing.
Awesome.
And I just want to follow that up too with to engage that comment about like the force that our opposition has used in the past, and like a lot of the tools that used to be just theirs, we've been able to engage as activists and as experts. And so our toolkit has changed in how we combat these things. A lot of the things that used to be off the table, like media, where our opponents could really own a narrative and drive it home, we're able to compete in those environments now. And it allows for a different conversation to happen, and again, to engage people around the possibilities. So I think a lot of credit, not only to organizers, but their partners in nonprofit and philanthropy, like to engage this toolkit in a way that we have to, because we have to use every tool, because again, as you see in the film, we're being attacked on all sides at all times, and we have to use every opportunity to combat those narratives and to combat those systems. So I think we're working with a new set of ways to engage people, and we're seeing that play out on the national scales by how people are allowed to be involved. And again, highlighting not only the intersections, but the focus on accessibility of movement work has been really important to drive that engagement too.
So speaking of toolkits, and Marcey, this is probably directed more towards you. I mean, there's an abundance of art and creativity and like in the activism that I've seen in Omaha and nationally. So Marcey, how do you feel like that like translates or impacts like Culture House being this space for organizers? I mean, like, tell me about the art and that transition into activism.
Well, from what I've seen in research, that in growing communities, that art is definitely like a quick win for creating a vibrant community, and engaging. So with that was, you know, initially what we stood on with getting involved in the community, just being a space and resource center for that as well. But also with art, and throughout its history, you know, it's always had, you know, meaning to it. You know, it's all about just kind of just having art that reflects, you know, on the current times. So just as in with music, you know, and with visual art, being able to channel, you know, and reflect on what's going on now is important. For one, I think that, you know, people process things differently and they understand differently too. So through imagery, through music, but using those platforms, you know, to engage other people too is very important.
And I promise I won't follow up everyone's statement. I promise I won't. But I don't know did you know that's a Nina Simone quote? That's one of my favorite Nina Simone quotes. It's an artist's duty to reflect the times. And I love that you just said that, because I think about that all the time. But also thinking about like the ability art has to increase imagination and to increase how people see possibility, and connecting like those experimentations that we have to do in the mind to like these other systems. And we need people to be creative and imaginative, because the solution, we don't know exactly how that's going to look, but if people are open-minded to the possibilities and the different ways that solutions can show up, it allows us to do that work so much more genuinely and authentically, and with the exact freedoms and the way we want to see liberation. So it's been a great honor to work out of the Culture House and to work with Marcey as we engage all these different communities under this roof.
So that's a good segue into, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say from the toolkit perspective too, Joaquin and Culture House and Academy of Equity have developed so many toolkits to help people who want to enter the activist space to get involved in a lot of different ways, whether that's direct action and protest, whether that's support to the direct action. And they do such a beautiful job of creating community and filling that space with beauty and food and fellowship to sustain the work that's happening there. And that's one thing that I find that the ACLU does really well too. You know, we're kind of in this wonky legal policy arena, which that's our happy place. We're happy to, but we can't do it alone. And we do it most effectively when other voices are with us in that space. And so even if it's us having an individual conversation before a judge or before a legislative committee, when our supporters, 20,000 plus across the state of Nebraska in every corner and every county, speak up and say, yeah, us too, this matters to us too, and we want you to take action on this. You know, you can follow us on social. That's a great way to find out about breaking news. There's tools and tricks for how to interface with elected officials, how to write a letter to the editor, how to develop a direct action if that's your thing. And we need all of it. We need all of it to work together. That strengthens each strategy and is a pivot if we lose, that we go to the next. And, you know, you can't beat folks who don't quit, and that's us and a lot of people beyond the screen.
Awesome. So I was just thinking, we do have a couple of questions, I think, from the Facebook, but first, talking about how that you guys don't quit, right? Can we talk a little bit about, can you let us tell us your experience on how to give yourself like self-care? Like, how do you balance the work you do with your personal life and family life? Rose, specifically you were saying how your parent, like you're a daughter of immigrants, you have this very connected story, you know, so, I mean, tell me about that. How do you kind of give yourself some space and care?
Yeah, it's every day. My parents were former meatpacking plant workers, so that issue also touches home. I think so many issues for all of us probably, you know, either as women or people of color just resonate. But one way I take, my parents are my pillars. My family is my pillar. The only reason I do my work is because of them. And they came to this country with, you know, the promise of that freedom from the Constitution. And that's exactly what I plan to preserve. And just for myself, I love to meditate. I think that's really helpful just to clear the mind and take anxiety off. And then just for fun, I mean, I think you need to surround yourself with people who make you laugh, because you need to laugh every now and then. And also now that we can't have that personal connection, I surround myself with things that just make me happy. Like I have this turtle that connects to my phone. I have like a llama cup. Anyway, I just surround myself with happy things and that make me smile. So I think Yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Anybody else have some?
I will say,
Soundtracks to life.
I don't have a soundtrack. I did want to talk about that question of like self-care and like expand that conversation because one, I need to justify why I'm never taking a vacation just for my own sake. But two, like to, again, like allow for the work to be that care, especially as people most impacted by the work. Like I get life from doing that because I know like I'm taking care of myself in the long run if I'm working against these policies and I'm working against these institutions so that I can allow myself to live more freely. And doing that like rebellious work is the like intentional act of liberating yourself. So there's like a lot wrapped into how you come to the work because you'll have to take those moments of celebration as care because it's like we're doing a good job in this fight. And so it's kind of conflated, but I think like again, we all laugh when someone asks how we are doing self-care because like we understand like that work is so like urgent and long ongoing that we have to find care inside of the work and create that community so that we're excited to see each other as we go to create that good trouble.
Mm-hmm. So we were just talking about like how artists and art in general kind of impact the vision of like, or like help us with the vision of what society we really want. So Scout and Danielle, so like maybe with the reproductive justice, also the police brutality that's been happening lately, what does it look like to have reproductive justice in Nebraska, to have like a use? Well, I mean, I don't know what I want to say there, but you know, like a more protect and serve police force, you know.
Well, I'll just say this is kind of more piggybacking off of the self-care type question, but goes with what you were saying. You know, I'd always been passionate about reproductive rights, but like I now have an 11-month-old, so like becoming a new mom and seeing like how becoming a parent is basically like the most important decision you would ever make. So it really like fueled my passion to make sure that other people and other Nebraskans are able to make the decisions that are right for themselves and their family. And so I think kind of like Joaquin was saying, like it's kind of a form of self-care to come to that work, especially now from a very personal place. So I don't think it answered your question about art, but it was just a thought. So
no, great, thank you.
No, I think that really resonates, and I understand it plays out a bit in the film as well. Like there's no work-life balance. Our work is our life. But we do also have other things in our lives, and we are whole people. And it takes a great big village to let us have the privilege to do this work. I'm really fortunate that I have family that I can count on and that are close to me that can help with my little kids, and a trusted partner who's more than an equal partner and knew what he was getting into with this whole thing early on, which I'm really, really grateful for. But, like to the reproductive justice question, what is that vision? What does that look like? Not that long ago, in fact, just a few years ago, Nebraska was kind of middle of the pack for reproductive rights, not showing off, not falling behind. They had passed some restrictions, but not the worst of the worst. And it wasn't really a top issue. It wasn't really a consistent onslaught. And what we've seen, year after year in state after state, including Nebraska, is this consistent stealth attack where it's hundreds of abortion restrictions introduced and passed and litigated. It's not an accident. And now we're one of the few states that's considered extremely hostile to reproductive rights and abortion care. And, you know, what does that mean beyond just kind of the map or the scorecard? Well, it's reproductive justice and reproductive freedom are about freedom and gender equity and charting your own path, and having bodily integrity and dignity, for these key issues affecting your body and your family and your future. And so, you know, take this moment right now. Look at the legislative agenda for tomorrow. We're in a pandemic. There's 1,000 questions about how we're going to reopen school. Small businesses are shutting. Meatpacking workers aren't getting basic protections to protect their health. What's our legislature spending time on tomorrow? Banning abortion. That's their priority tomorrow. So you got to pay attention. And I know you're tired, and I know there's a lot of things to look at, but that's not an accident either. They want you to tune out. They want you to get apathetic. They want you to look away, so to continue to eviscerate our rights while they have this moment and why they hold all of the power together. So this is a place where we have to, we'll sleep when we're 80. Like, this is go time. And it's really important that folks know that. And how out of whack for Nebraska state leaders to have these priorities that don't improve our communities, our families, or our future, but that restrict fundamental rights and dignity. And how shameful. And it's up to us and everybody watching and beyond to amplify that and say, no, not in my name.
So maybe I will follow up a lot of people's comments.
Good.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Educate.
But to bring that kind of back to that art question and the imagination, like, that's why those systems function so harshly against the most marginalized, because it defers you from using those creative skills to imagine your life without these systems. So I think that's what people really mean when they talk about distractions. Like, that sometimes can feel like a dismissal of what people are going through, because like these things are really impacting everyone and they're important issues, and we need to be able to multitask because they're all threats to our freedoms and liberations. But again, like, the distracting part is it takes away, we're conditioned to not be imaginative. We're conditioned to act in line with processes, even if they don't serve us. And what does it mean to use an artistic space or artistic tools to break away from that conditioning and dream up something new? Because again, like, we have to meet that force of the opposition, and they're dreaming up evil tactics all day. You know, they do not have a lack of imagination. Some of them do, like in our legislature, they're going back to very old school, like white supremacy 101 kind of things. To distract. But what does it mean that the people that they're getting this information from are using varied tactics? And we need to be able to do the same thing. And we need to be in a place where we can dream up that stuff to meet the urgency.
So we have a question from the audience about environmental racism and the Standing Rock movement. But the part of the question is, how does the panel feel about the government's labeling activists as dangerous or criminals, like how this has been happening lately? So, I mean, I think Jaqueen, Marcey, Danielle, you can kind of speak to that.
From like personal experience at the moment. But again, like, that's part of their like oldest toolkit. Like, what does it mean to label indigenous people as savages so that we're allowed to dehumanize them and not feel guilty about that treatment? What does it mean to label activists or organizers as troublemakers and criminals so that you don't have to engage with the actual conversation that those same folks are asking us to have? So those are some of the oldest tricks in the book. And again, that's why it's so important that we're expanding our toolkit, because like, they'd be able to silence us in regular media or traditional media. But now that we're able to create media, those messages are seen in a different way, and we're able to have those conversations that move things forward. And so it's not a surprise that those things happen, because again, like there's real historical context to all of the tools that people in those positions are using against us. So from my own experience trying to equate me to violence, you know what I mean, is an old school racist tactic, because one, there is that inherent conditioning to fear Black men in that way, to label them as violent as a way to stop a conversation that they want to have. So we are familiar with this. What I've been grateful and surprised to see is that people are catching on to those tactics, and we're able to, again, combat them in a new way that feels really supportive to the people that are marginalized and specifically targeted by positions of power. We've seen that with some of the stuff that's gone on at the police department here locally, as they name organizers blatantly and try to create and equate them to violence that we just know to be untrue based in real evidence. And so again, we appreciate the partnership of ACLU and other organizations to really call that out and use their toolkit to stop some of those actions that maybe organizers haven't had access to before.
Yeah, just, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. And again, I'm happy that, again, people do catch on to the same old kind of stuff, you know, always just trying to put fear out there. And again, you know, like he's saying, we have the chance right now to control the narrative, you know, given social media, and then given, you know, the outcome of the demonstrations that do take place. So we all know that, you know, we're not dangerous, and, you know, things like that. So.
Yeah, and I know Rose, I want Rose to jump in because she's been working on Indigenous justice and support for pipeline fighters and getting legal tools and information to help in that space as well. But I think at the heart of it is really, you know, what Joaquin and Marcey were talking about. It's othering, it's fear, it's instead of what we should be focused on, which is understanding and belonging. And, you know, I would challenge people who are making these claims today and in this moment to look to history, right? And to look to how many times was MLK arrested? How many times were the suffragettes arrested? You know, civil disobedience has always been a part of protest as well. Now, it's important that people have a clear-eyed understanding about the risks that go along with that kind of direct action. But when people feel that their voice isn't being heard otherwise and being suppressed otherwise, I think people are more willing to explore those options on their own. Now, of course, at the ACLU, we can't counsel people to break the law, but we can help people understand where the lines are, and then they have the agency, and we respect that, to make their own decisions. And look no farther than what's playing out in Omaha right now, both at Crossroads and the Old Market in May and June, and on the Farnham Street Bridge in July. And yes, perhaps organizers could have utilized a permit system, but also police could have allowed people to disperse when they're 2 blocks from their car. They could have issued a citation in lieu of arrest instead of detaining people for almost a day with limited access to human rights, kinds of things like water and medication, and in a COVID hotspot, which is the Douglas County Jail. All of those were intentional choices that we feel were inappropriate based on the content of the speech and the content of the message that is uncomfortable to hear for some in power. But it's important that they hear that. And those voices aren't going away, no matter how people want to label them on social media. It's important that we reaffirm and elevate and raise up what the core message is, and fight back against power structures that want to suppress that.
And I'll just add, I've been working with Keystone Pipeline protesters and actually water protectors is the proper term. And they are our water protectors. They have had a target on their back since Standing Rock. And those names continue to pop in our open records requests when we file them. And in addition to the immediate concerns of safety and how they're going to handle those names, or whether they're going to be targeted for other enforcement purposes, there's the long-term consequence of due process and how you get those names removed from any FBI list. And you see that not only in the protest context, but also in the students' rights context, where a lot of our students are considered gang members when they're just dressed a particular way. And there's no way to remove them in our law so their rights are protected. So that's something that we continue to work on, and that we definitely need support in moving in the legislature. And then just a tip for all organizers, there's an amazing website by the ACLU that provides those websites and chat apps that you can make sure are encrypted and are protected. So I would suggest that you look at those and use those for organizing, so you make sure you're not being surveilled by the government.
Awesome. So we've got a quick, from the audience, I want to shout out Brandy Crockett, who called and emailed her senator about LB 814 today. Awesome. Thank you, guys. And also, Danielle, I feel like you've alluded a couple times to this is not, the things that are happening are not a coincidence. And I feel like the film starts out immediately with the president, the current president, speaking, and it was his like swearing in address, and then goes straight to the Muslim ban, and then goes straight. I mean, it just like one thing after another. So I think the power of film, right, is that it can also tell the story that maybe the bigger structures aren't, the main structures aren't telling. So, I mean, is the ACLU, do you feel like, are you guys like trying to make it more apparent? Like with this film was the first time that people were let into the offices, seeing the background, the underbelly of the ACLU, like how people can't find their phone chargers and, you know, stuff like that. But can you just like talk to us about like, I guess like the place the ACLU has in our fight for civil liberties right now, you know? It feels huge.
It is an awesome responsibility and an awesome privilege, but it didn't happen overnight either, right? Like we're a 100-year-old civil rights and civil liberties organization on the national scene and have an over 50-year history here in Nebraska. And so we've been doing the work for a long time and helping to pave the way on a lot of these issues for a long time, but you know, it's kind of a Spinal Tap reference. Now everything's turned up to 11. So we're not starting from scratch, which is the good news. We are grateful to have such an incredible group of supporters that support our work by writing letters, by contacting their senators, by making donations, by organizing, volunteer lawyers that join the cause, all of those kinds of things. So we're grateful to have that history and that power and those assets to bring to this moment. And in the wake of the 2016 election, we saw an influx of support. After the Muslim ban wins, we saw an influx of support. We're seeing an influx of support every time another state bans abortion and people are waking up to these very, very real threats. So I definitely believe it's not an accident. When you look at common sense or on a lot of these issues, actually there's a lot of consensus among Nebraskans and Americans on like DACA, for example, or reasonable immigration policy, or even reproductive rights. But what you're seeing play out in the courts and in the political arena is the fact that voter suppression, gerrymandering, and term limits are not an accident. And so rather than carrying out the will of the people and the majority of the people in a democratic system, we're seeing all of these levers of government being pulled in this kind of last gasp moment these leaders are seeing the demographic shifts that are happening in our state, in our country, where our country is becoming more progressive, it's younger, it's more diverse. And that's, you know, terrifying to the status quo and the old guard. And so there's using everything they can in this moment to hold on to that broken past instead of move forward to a brighter future. But, you know, the ACLU is not going anywhere. We're in all 50 states. We're growing. We're having impact. And we don't take government funds because we're government watchdogs. So that holds us accountable to the community as well, whether or not they think we're doing a good job or focused on the right things or being authentic partners. And so that's something that, you know, we're really thoughtful about and really humble about as well. But our team is so smart and wicked funny. And sometimes I think, oh my gosh, if our offices were bugged, like this would look because like you have to laugh sometimes in really hard, weird moments. But you know, everybody works their hearts out and brings so much perspective and talent and ability, and it all works well together most of the time. And we get it wrong too. And when we get it wrong, we appreciate, you know, each other calling in, calling out, same for partners so that we can do better next time and learn along the way. But we're always trying, and we're never going to stop, and we're never going away.
Well, and I think that was apparent in the film, is they did focus a little bit on the Charlottesville case, where, I mean, the ACLU is representing everyone's right to free speech, even if it's hateful.
Definitely disagree with it. Yes.
Even if we disagree with it. So yeah, that was a tough watch. How did you guys feel as, you know, employees of the ACLU? I mean, I know that one person that was interviewed said, you know, he didn't agree, but he respected the decision.
Yeah.
Is this a conversation that like happens, I mean, like in your guys' office? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when we were interviewing Rose and Scout for their positions, and we talked about this really specifically, like we represent principles, and sometimes that can be in conflict with, you know, some other aspects of our work or our values. And, you know, how do you approach that and how do you look at it? And I'll never forget what Rose said in that interview. She said, like, it would be soul crushing to represent a white supremacist, but I get it. Because what we see when the government draws lines about who's a good protester or what's appropriate speech, they're always weaponized against the most marginalized. So we look at that really clear-eyed, but I'll tell you, it was painful and heart-wrenching within the organization in the wake of Charlottesville. And there's still reverberations of that happening today. I do think that the organization is doing a more thoughtful approach to future work and how we use our power, privileges, and assets, recognizing those historical disparities. So yes, there might be a free speech case, a clear principle for a group that we disagree with, and perhaps we take the case, or perhaps we let them find another lawyer and we go another place.
Awesome. Thanks for the, you know, being so honest and open.
Yeah, I gotta stop talking.
I'm gonna say something again. So as you know, as a community organizer, I think it's important, again, like, to increase those partnerships, because it allows for that to fill in the gap of those conversations. One, like, I was really struck by the lack of like people of color representation at that higher level in the ACLU. And I know, like, as our local partners work to create that differentiation and create that clear representation, like, the importance of those partnerships becomes even more pivotal to how that work is achieved in community. And so, like, we'll have to have those conversations as we talk about partnering with ACLU, because again, like, those high profile cases are points of contention for some of our community members. And it's important to acknowledge like their right to have those feelings. And again, like to close the gap on information and what it means. Like, what does this process mean? Like, what does it mean to have precedent on like something that even though we don't agree with how people are using this law, if they were able to use that as a way to disenfranchise white supremacists, they're definitely going to use it on Black and brown people as we advocate for what's right. So knowing that there's a lot of nuance in how these machines work and that we have to acknowledge and bring those things together, like this is an issue that we're going through with the health community right now. Like, we want to understand why a mandate for something good is different than a mandate for something bad. Excuse me, but those tools look so similar that the only difference is relationship. And what does it mean to have relationship with community as you try to increase the good that happens in our society? And I think that's the real beauty of partnering with organizations and bridging those grassroots efforts, because you are able to have that conversation and you know that these are tactics out of love for community as opposed to what can look similar to some of those more hateful things. And so that's a tough conversation to have. And it's not possible to bring everybody onto that, and rightfully so. But knowing that we are able to increase that nuance is really important on how we get things done as partners in the society.
So we're gonna have, this hour has gone by really fast. So we're gonna have to like wrap up a little bit. I think a final question though, and this was from our audience. What would be the biggest win each of you think would get our community on a better track? And or call to action for us, you guys. Give us some hope. Give us some tools. What can we as a community do to support you and all the work that you're doing?
With the one top of mind, again, shout out to Brandy. Tomorrow on the agenda is LB 814. Please contact your senator and ask that they don't support this bill. It bans care that women need and doctors recommend, and we need to tell politicians to stop playing doctor and let people make the decisions that are best for themselves and their families. So it's LB 814, and please ask that your senator focus on things that are actually priorities for Nebraskans.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll move to mine. So there is a hearing in the Business and Labor Committee this Thursday at 1:30 p.m., room 1565. The amendment is 3238, which will implement protections for meatpacking plant workers. Something I didn't cover, but just so everyone has context, as of July 28th, 21 deaths and 223 hospitalizations have been tied to Nebraska meatpacking plants. 1 in every COVID-19 case is traced back to a meatpacking plant. So the time is now to implement those protections. We can't wait. We can't afford to wait till the next legislative session. So please reach out to the Business and Labor Committee and ask them to pass that amendment.
I think for us, like a win that we could have is again, like, well, a win that we could have is to stop the criminalization of our First Amendment rights as it pertains to how we express our displeasure with actions of elected officials, and get officials to understand, like, we believe in democracy and representative politics. So like, it's important to survey your community as you think about what is the best legislation and policy for them. And right now there is a huge disconnect between how people create legislation and policy and the actual will of the people. A good thing that comes to mind is Medicare for all, and the fact that we did the right thing in Nebraska. We did the process as it was supposed to be done, and they have used all the tools possible to ensure that that does not come about, to ensure that they don't respect the will of the people. And so what does that drive us to do? And I guess that leads me to a call of action, is to engage with community in a real way that allows for you to act outside of these processes that sometimes don't get us to the ends that we seek and have expressed. So what does it mean to engage not only in the ways that we're taught, but in the ways that we're discouraged from engaging, and utilizing that community voice and your power as a resident to get things done. And so a tool that we have to offer at CULXR House and through Academy of Equity is the Organizer Lab, which introduces people that may be new to this process or need some refreshment in like foundational principles of organizing, and using those tools to start from your place of power in your community that you're familiar with to build out those actions. So you have people that are connected to you personally and will help you do that work as you increase your base and your audience. So we offer those tools free because we want everyone to be engaged with this work and to keep it top of mind that there have to be other processes and that we have to use the means available to us to get real work done and get real systemic change done.
Marcey, did you have something to add there? No. Danielle, I guess we'll end with you.
Gosh, that's a lot of
bring
pressure.
it in.
All right. Well, I mean, number one, thank you again, Film Streams. Thank you, Marcey. Thank you, Jakeem. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Scout, for giving up time in your evenings and always busy schedules to share your brilliance and your heart and your mind with the audience and reflecting on this great film that showcases a lot of our work at the ACLU that we're really proud of. But you know, what does a win look like? I mean, I want it all. I'm not shy about that. And, you know, it takes us perhaps back where we started. But I think, you know, the important thing for me as, you know, a former organizer, state senator, today's civil rights leader, is that win's going to look really different for each person. So the win is, don't be overwhelmed. Don't undervalue or underestimate the power of your voice or your vote. So the win might be doing one thing tomorrow on an issue that really matters to you. The win might be getting your vote by mail application in and getting your friends and family's vote by mail application in. And if you have problems for that, let us know. Let us know. It is an election year. We have a critical opportunity to shift and change things, and don't discount those local races and those state races and those ballot initiatives, which have a lot of impact for people's lives beyond the, you know, hustle and bustle that is a presidential campaign, which of course is important too, but don't discount that. And then, you know, I want to just let people see a additional resource that ACLU developed with ID Black Girl and Black and Pink. There's a Nebraska specific anti-racist inventory where you can learn more about Black-led organizations and how to get involved in them in Nebraska and how to support them. There's a host of legislative issues that people should be looking at. There's continual updates there to shift to the local budgets as we reform and revision and right-size policing in our communities and invest more in mental health and economic opportunity and educational equity instead of taxing ourselves to death to fuel racial injustice and mass incarceration, which is what we're doing and not serving anybody well. And it's the courage to have that imagination and that vision to do things differently and to recognize the power and the light that are inside of each of us individually and how that's amplified and sparkled when it's collective. So that's where it's at.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I just want to let people know that the ACLU has put resources for finding your senator and message forms for LB 814 in the comments, as well as a petition to protect essential workers. So you can see that in the comments on their Facebook page, social media, website. Yeah, you guys, thank you so much. I mean, I know that you have very limited time and you're doing this great work, and I'm just so grateful that you spent time with us to kind of help us understand what you're doing and how we can support you. So, and everybody on Facebook Live, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.